Good discussion with the questions going around. I think it was important to acknowledge that since the disaster in the Gulf, industry has stepped forward with safety measures on their own. Of course, the regulatory environment has changed a great deal, but I think it was important to get some of that out on the record here this morning. This whole issue of alternative compliance is one that, while it does allow for a level of flexibility, as Senator Hoeven has been discussing, I think, too, it also presents that level of regulatory uncertainty. I mean, we certainly saw some of that play out with Shell's exploration or their plans this summer, when the permits that they had, they believed to allow them to tee up a work plan that would go without delay. Instead, what we saw was final BSEE approval came July 22nd, but Shell wasn't able to commence any operations until August. And then Dr. Roquel mentioned this in terms of the tight timeframes that they're dealing with. What many people don't understand is the very, very, very limited season that we have within the Arctic because of the environmental issues that are coming. When the ice is coming, the work plan does not allow you to be in the water. And so Shell was looking at a situation that they needed to cease their drilling operations by the 28th of September, because their operations plan required them to be completely done. Excuse me, their exploration plan required their operations to cease by October 31. So when you think about it, it is less than 2 months that you are in the water. Less than 2 months. Ask anybody. Senator Cassidy is sitting down there in the Gulf of Mexico and has the benefit of some warm weather. You've got some hurricanes down there, but it's basically 365 days a year. So when you compress your season into less than 2 months and recognize that you've got to get the flotilla up there that Director Salerno was talking about in order to put them in place for all of this, it is an operation that simply cannot have additional regulatory uncertainty. They need to know going into it what it's going to look like. And Dr. Roquel, I'd like you to speak just a little bit. I don't want you off the hook this morning, because when we're talking about the Arctic Plan, this is where you clearly have some expertise. I'd like to hear from you this morning what you think the Department of Interior should be doing with the Arctic rule as it stands today. You've mentioned a couple things, the same season relief well. You mentioned a little bit about the mechanical recovery tools, the relief well requirements, and I have suggested that the administration needs to look at changing the current 10-year term for offshore leases in recognition of the shortened drill season and just the extra challenges of operating in the region. Can you give to the committee some of your suggestions in terms of what Interior should be doing specific to the Arctic Plan?
No, thank you, Senator.
I think you need to push it again.
I believe that, as I articulated earlier, the same season relief rig requirement is pretty egregious to the industry. However, keeping it as a performance standard, which would mean you would have it as equivalency, a same season relief rig equivalency. So if you have the same level of protection, that would be adequate. So in other words, promote that regulatory flexibility from a performance standard. The reason the season is so short, September 28th, was because they were willing to, they were interested in making sure that you could have that same season relief rig on site. And so if you get rid of the one or allow that flexibility, then you don't have to, you can extend the season, which when you look at the opportunity cost of those days lost, as you point out, over time it can be significant. in terms of billions upon billions of dollars in terms of production foregone. So, and then the third has to do with the mechanical having the mechanical for the worst case discharge, and you want more flexibility. And I think what has been successfully accomplished throughout the world is having the operators and the stakeholders, including the governments, work on something called a net environmental benefits analysis, whereby if there is a release, everybody decides on scene, who has the best information, what to do, and use all the tools in the toolbox, including in situ burning, including dispersants, making that call depending on the sensitivity of the environment, depending on the weather conditions and the ocean conditions and everything else. In other words, on site, having the best information available.
Are we taking that, the lessons learned from other Arctic nations that have exploration opportunity, whether it be Russia, whether it be Norway, are we taking from them some of the best practices and looking to develop an Arctic rule utilizing that?
I don't believe we are.
Why is that?
We're more prescriptive, whereas Norway and Greenland and Canada seems to be more performance standard based. And I think one thing that I feel strongly about is the United States needs to be a leader in the Arctic.
Are we?
Well, I don't, depends who you talk to, but I think what we need to be able to demonstrate is that we can have a safe, viable Arctic drilling program that other countries can look at and say, yeah, they can do it, and they're doing it the right way, they're doing it the correct way, they're doing it the safe way. And I'm particularly concerned about our friends to the west, because as you well know, the Beaufort Gyre moves from the Russians down to Alaska. So my big concern about the next blowout is not going to be in the United States, it's going to be they're coming into our waters. So I would say that maintaining that leadership position in the Arctic Council with the other countries using performance standards, and all the regulations ultimately need to be based on sound science, sound engineering, and that's the only way we're going to get.
Well, Mr. Rockel, I couldn't agree with you more. I believe that the United States should set those standards. I think working with our regulators in a way that does exactly what Mr. Melito has been talking about, making sure that we're paying attention to safety first, but also making sure that there is regulatory certainty that helps to make sure that it's economic as a project. And I fear that we have ceded any leadership, any standard setting in the Arctic right now. The two players that were front and center in the U.S. Arctic, Shell and Statoil, are no longer there as of the end of this season. Shell's words are they're out for the indefinite future, and Statoil has basically said they have turned back their leases. And so for us, as leaders in an Arctic environment, which the United States clearly should be doing, I think we are ceding the standards. I think that we are ceding an economic opportunity, and I think that it is most unfortunate. And unfortunately, I think the reason that we're now taking this back seat is because of some of the regulatory issues and hurdles that we have faced that have sent operators that did have great interest in the Arctic and put them on an indefinite pause. Let me turn to Senator Cantwell.